So we started measuring carbon dioxide in 1958. And you can see that by the middle 60s, when he showed my class this image, it was already clear that it was going up. I respected him and learned from him so much. I followed this. And when I went to the Congress in the middle 1970s, I helped organize the first hearings on global warming and asked my professor to come and be the lead-off witness. And I thought that would have such a big impact, we'd be on the way to solving this problem, but it didn't work that way. But I kept having hearings, and in 1984 I went to the Senate and really dug deeply into this issue with science roundtables and the like. I wrote a book about it, ran for president in 1988, partly to try to gain some visibility for that issue. And in 1992 went to the White House. We passed a version of a carbon tax and some other measures to try to address this. Went to Kyoto in 1997 to help get a treaty that's so controversial in the U.S. at least.
Doesn't like taking questions very much, and that was certainly on display last month when journalist Phelan McAleer confronted him at a conference for environmental journalists. Who reacted, well, by cutting off his mic.
The point of this is,
the British High Court in London found that Inconvenient Truth had 9 significant errors in it. Given this film has been shown in schools to children, do you accept those 9 significant errors? I know you say that it's funded by deniers, that court case, but a judge in the British High Court, after a lengthy hearing, found there were 9 significant errors. This has been shown to children. Do you accept those findings, and have you done anything to correct those errors?
Well, I'm not going to go through all of those. The ruling was in favor of the movie, by the way, and the ruling was in favor of showing the movie in schools. And that's really the bottom line on that. There's been such a long discussion of each one of those specific things. One of them, for example, was that polar bears, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time ago, that polar bears really aren't endangered. Well, polar bears didn't get that word. So,
well, the number of polar bears have increased, actually, and are increasing.
You don't think they're endangered, do you?
The number of polar bears have increased.
Do you think they're endangered?
The number of polar bears have increased. I mean, right, if the number of polar bears increase, surely they're not endangered.
And
a judge did have a lengthy hearing.
We have to move on.
No, but no, I mean, Vice President Gore hasn't. Vice President.
We're not doing a debate here.
No, this question. He hasn't answered the question. Vice
we
President
have 10 minutes left for these people.
Yes, but I would appreciate his answer to the court.
Yeah. Yep.
Pretty classy, right? Well, Mr. McAleer and his colleague Anne McElhinney have produced a new movie that shows why Al Gore's wrong about global warming and outlines just how damaging global warming hysteria really is. The movie is not evil, just wrong, and those filmmakers, Phelan McAleer and Anne McElhinney, now join us. Guys, good to see you. Welcome back to the program. Pretty gutsy. Now, it was the other journalist that shut off the mic, not Al Gore. We don't know who shut it off.
Well, no, it was the journalists. I mean, and it's
so-called journalists.
Yes, it's environmental journalists. I think they're environmentalists rather than journalists. They see it's their duty to protect the multimillionaire politician / businessman rather than support the journalist asking difficult questions.
Well, he's claiming that this court decision actually, favored his point of view. That is absolutely false.
That is false.
Explain.
Well, the court case, it was a lengthy hearing, maybe a month of hearings. There was 9 aspects of an inconvenient truth they looked at, and they found 9 significant errors or exaggerations. I wouldn't like my documentary, our documentary, to have 9 significant errors, and if it did, I certainly wouldn't be showing it to school children across America, and that's the important thing.
But there was also more to that decision, if I recall. They didn't say that it should be shown in schools, as he was saying. There was an addendum to that, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, it's like a packet of cigarettes now in the UK.
With a warning.
Yeah, a government
that
health
this
warning.
is a political film, that this is not necessarily factual.
Yeah.
It's facts, including scientific facts, have never gotten in the way of disinformation. So too with global warming, which hasn't stopped the critics of Mr. Gore, the so-called climate skeptics, including one who was recently featured on the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal. In the former vice president's first interview since being honored with the Nobel Peace Prize, he answered that, too. As part of NBC Universal's Green is Universal initiative, the Today Show sent its hosts to the 3 corners of the earth. Matt Lauer to the Arctic Circle, Ann Curry to Antarctica, and Meredith Vieira to 49th Street. Whence she asked Mr. Gore about that Wall Street Journal op-ed column by John Christie.
He wrote, "I see neither the developing catastrophe nor the smoking gun proving that human activity is to blame for most of the warming we see." So what do you make of his assessment?
Well, he's an outlier. He no longer belongs to the IPCC, and he is way outside the scientific consensus. And the reason the IPCC was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the thousands of scientists who make up that group have for almost 20 years now created a very strong scientific consensus.
Mr. Gore also likened Mr. Christie to, quote, people who believe the Earth is flat. Meanwhile, Mr. Gore's message on the central issue of global warming has always included predictions based on scientific studies as well as the shocking trends. But in just a couple of years' time, many of those predictions have become present.
We face a planetary emergency, Meredith. The climate crisis is by far the biggest challenge human civilization has ever faced. And we're putting 70 million tons of global warming pollution into the Earth's atmosphere every single day, as if it's an open sewer. And that pollution is trapping a lot more of the sun's heat, and that's raising temperatures, melting the ice, making the storms stronger, lengthening and deepening the droughts, ironically also making flooding worse and moving tropical diseases into temperate latitudes, and causing a range of other changes that are not good for human civilization. But the good news is we can stop it.
I'm sorry to be a one-trick pony today, but this has been, if I can be honest with you, for 2 decades. Even before that. I mean, this issue, I can remember talking about it when I was in Sacramento in 1984. I remember the show I saw this guy Oppenheimer on, and I said, we are being scammed. It was This Week with David Brinkley. We got 20 years to save the planet. We are warming at an unprecedented rate, and I remember just 5 years earlier, the Time and Newsweek covers were all about global cooling. And all of a sudden, we're warming and we're heating up. We're going to destroy the planet. We only got 20 years. And Mr. Oppenheimer on that show on that date in 1984 said, we can't prove it yet, but we don't have time to wait for proof. In case we're right, we've got to start acting now. And I said, whoa, you are a scientist and you can't prove it, and yet you want, and he talked about all the things we have to do. Paul Ehrlich, I was in Pittsburgh, the population bomb. And Julian Simon made him a bet that everything he predicted about the cost of metals and other commodities would go up or would go down as the population grew, and market forces led to demand, which brought prices down. And Ehrlich lost the bet, and he's still a guru. Julian Simon has since passed away. We've posted this on my website over the years. This issue, global warming, has been one of the foundational building blocks for a future world global government. It has been a way for displaced communists to get their hands on the inner workings of the freedom of the United States of America. They have been toying with, polluting, and destroying people's outlook and minds. They've been lying to them, and they've created and scared to death a bunch of kids over another fraud that the polar bears are dying. There are more polar bears than ever. People doing the surveys. In fact, little kids have to shoot them up there to save themselves. A little 16-year-old shot one the other day. They're not dying. Nothing about this is true. It is insidious, and it has been for the express purpose of destroying the free markets of the United States of America. And along with it, the freedom of the people here, by creating such guilt that people would willingly go along with raising their taxes and having their choice restricted in practically everything involving energy, all to establish dictatorial powers in governments around the world over their people, including in this country.
It's the difference between observing a specific thing and understanding whether or not that specific thing is a fair representation of how things are generally in the world. Simple, right? It's kind of like being an adult. Everybody gets that. Apparently, unless you are in politics. In politics right now, full court shots aren't hard. We know that because we've seen YouTube clips of kids making them. In politics now, whatever we're looking at right this instant disproves everything else we know about the world.
I don't think it takes a genius to see through the more snow is proof of global warming claim.
63% of the country is now
covered in snow, and it's breaking Al Gore's heart because the snow is also burying his global warming theory.
The global warming hearing that Barbara Boxer was going to have tomorrow has now been canceled because of the blizzard. So
it's almost too easy.
It's the most severe winter storm in years, which would seem to contradict Al Gore's hysterical global warming theories. Rumor has it that another storm could be headed this way next week. Global warming, where are you? We want you back.
See the science at work here? Clearly the climate can't be changing because there's a storm this week on the East Coast. Sean Hannity has proven that there is no such thing as global warming because Sean Hannity feels cold. We dispatched the Rachel Maddow Show's chief winter weather correspondent, Mr. Kent Jones, to try to confirm Mr. Hannity's intrepid reporting. Kent?
Still snowing. Still snowing. A lot of snow. Snow, snow, snow. It's still snowing. It's not snowing. It's snowing.
Well, full disclosure, this is a shameless plug here. I've got a new book coming out next week called An Inconvenient Book, Real Solutions to the World's Biggest Problems. And today I'm going to give you a preview of Chapter 1 called Global Warming, Storming and Conforming. I wrote this chapter basically as kryptonite for you to use against your Gore-worshipping psycho friends. The next time they tell you how global warming causes all sorts of massive natural disasters, you say, really? That's interesting because I heard somewhere, I'm trying to remember, that deaths per year from extreme weather are down 95% since the 1920s. Sure, you'll be unhip and friendless, but at least you'll be accurate. Anyway, as I put the chapter together, the thing that struck me, the thing that was more amazing to me than the facts that I was finding, was the fact that no one wanted to talk about those facts. If a scientist says that temperatures are up 0.01 degree, lead story around the country in every newspaper. But when somebody with decades of experience comes out and says global warming is a manufactured crisis, no one cares, and you can hear a pin drop. How do I know? Because that is exactly what happened last week when the founder of the Weather Channel wrote an article that began, and I quote, "It is the greatest scam in history. I'm amazed, appalled, and highly offended by it. Global warming, it is a scam." But since that opinion doesn't fit nicely into the mouth of the media beast, hello NBC, you probably didn't hear a word about it. Well, now you will. John Coleman is the founder of the Weather Channel. He was also the first weatherman ever on Good Morning America, and he is currently weatherman at KUSI News in San Diego. John, your head about exploded with the NBC thing this week. Is that was the breaking point for you?
Well, I had been listening to all the global warming talk for a long time and posting material about global warming on our website. But finally, the crescendo of global warming myth, nonsense, exploded in my head, and I had to write a real rant. And that's the one that got noticed. I put it on our website. It was picked up by icecap.us. Picked up by Drudge. First thing you knew, it was all over the newspapers, all over the radio, all over the TV sets, and I had created a bit of a stir, and all I was doing was telling you the truth as best I know it.
Yeah. Why is it that the scientists are all in on this? I mean, so many people are in on the global warming is real, and we've got to stop it right now.
Glenn, you got to make a living. First of all. So you spent 10 years becoming a PhD in meteorology. You got a research job, and you decide you're going to research the effect of human activity on global climate. And if you were to put out a research report that said not much and it doesn't seem too bad, you've probably wasted all your 10 years.
John, what was the turning point for you? Because I know that you said that you went in to look for an honest answer. You thought maybe it's real. What was the thing that stood out and you went, this is absolutely bogus?
Well, when I looked at the hockey stick graph that was
breaking news, we can now confirm
report,
it is cold and it is snowing along the East Coast in February. You know, if one person wins the lottery, that's awesome for that person, but it does not disprove the existence of the recession. When it rains in the desert, that does not disprove the existence of the desert. It's still a desert right there, even in the place where it rained. If you have smoked a cigarette in your life and you are not currently suffering from lung cancer or heart disease, your existence, while healthy and happy, does not disprove the fact that smoking causes lung cancer and heart disease. The evidence we have of flight, birds, bees, airplanes, what have you, does not disprove the existence of gravity. The existence of monkeys does not disprove evolution. The existence of tadpoles does not disprove the existence of frogs. Full court shots are hard. Evolution is real. Gravity is real. The recession, real. Deserts, dry. Smoking, bad. Frogs exist. Also, so do storms. The fact that it is snowing somewhere, anywhere, at any one time, does not tell you any useful thing about the overall climate. NASA says, you know, those hippies at NASA, NASA says that global average temperatures for the last year were the second hottest year on record, ever. The past decade was the warmest decade in the past 2,000 years. But it's snowing somewhere today, so that must all be meaningless. Okay, but if we're going to take one fact about the current weather and use it to obfuscate every other observable truth about the climate as a whole, I would like to add one thing to the mix. There's no snow in Vancouver for the Winter Olympics. Everybody panic! Joining us now is Emmy Award winner and scientist Bill Nye, the science guy. Mr. Nye, thank you very much for coming back on the show. It's nice to have you here.
It's so good to be here.
Can you explain in layman's terms whether a snowstorm disproves global warming?
Well, first of all, it doesn't, no. But we remind you that global warming was the first term for this phenomenon that we now call climate change. So it's very reasonable that a snowstorm in Washington that's this severe is a result of climate change.
Is it consistent to have extreme weather conditions like big storms or even seasonally appropriate storms and to have the kind of climate change that's been forecast and discussed by most of the reputable scientists in the world?
I know what you're driving at, Rachel. Yes, this would be consistent with such a thing, as is no snow near the city of Vancouver on Mount Cypress there, as is the big mudslides we had here in Southern California the day before yesterday and a little bit last night. There's more energy in the atmosphere, and this is stirring things up. If you want to get serious about it, these guys claiming that the snow in Washington disproves climate change are almost unpatriotic. They're denying science. So they're very happy to have the weather forecast be accurate within a few hours, but they're displeased or unenchanted by predictions of the world getting warmer. It's really it shakes me up.
And you say, using the term unpatriotic and saying that it's sort of defying science, do you feel like there is a legitimate beef about the facts here, honestly? Or do you feel like some people just don't like what the facts say?
Well, my thinking is, really, I've thought about this a lot as an educator. I spent a lot of time with a lot of people. It's mostly generational. It seems to be. This is anecdotal from me. Older people just have a much harder time grasping the idea that you have many billions of people on the planet with a very, very thin atmosphere. You're able to affect its climate. When younger people are able to sort of embrace it.
These people should be more than ashamed. They need to be held up to public ridicule. It is simply unconscionable. Look at the audio from the video we had last week of the kids from people who work at the World Wildlife Fund using their own kids. Please, Mr. Obama, please go to Copenhagen. The polar bears are dying. The hurricanes are getting more... Remember that? The hurricanes after Katrina, we're going to have every year. We're going to have 25 or 26 of them. Ocean temperatures are rising because of global warming. It's going to be a disaster. The media camped out on Florida beaches on June 1st when the hurricane season opens, looking for the next destructive hurricane. How many did we have this year? 0. How many did we have last year? Less than 5. And I don't know that all of them made land contact with the United States. How come that's not critically examined? Gore is photoshopping pictures of the planet to show 4 hurricanes at one time. One of them at the equator, which is not possible, meteorologically possible. You cannot have a hurricane at the equator. They got one hurricane spinning in the other direction. On his Photoshop picture in his new book, Cuba doesn't exist. It's underwater. Florida barely exists. 6,000-foot sea level rise would be required to submerge Cuba. And if it did, there wouldn't be a Denver. But Denver's still there.
My friend Lonnie Thompson digs core drills in the ice. They dig down, and they bring the core drills back up, and they look at the ice, and they study it. When the snow falls, it traps little bubbles of atmosphere, and they can go in and measure how much CO2 was in the atmosphere the year that that snow fell. What's even more interesting, I think, is they can measure the different isotopes of oxygen and figure out a very precise thermometer and tell you what the temperature was the year that that bubble was trapped in the snow as it fell. When I was in Antarctica, I saw cores like this, and a guy looked at it. He said, right here is where...
But the one thing in addition to that really bugs me is when people in power knowingly lie and manipulate the emotions of good, decent people